Conan the Barbarian didn't just launch a star, it reshaped fantasy with raw violence, unforgettable imagery, and a thunderous, mythic score. But behind the muscles and mayhem, the road to this cult classic was stranger, riskier, and more fascinating than you might imagine. This is the untamed story behind the forging of a legend: steel, fire, blood, and the people who hammered it into being. The film opens with a bold choice: a hero who lets silence speak for him. For almost 24 minutes, the character named in the title doesn't utter a word. The effect is incantatory, forcing you to watch how he moves, suffers, learns, and survives before you hear his voice. When the silence finally breaks, it isn't for chatter, it's for a line that binds the character to myth. Early in development, there was talk of the star narrating his own saga. In the end, the mantle went to Mako, whose ageless cadence turns exposition into legend. That balance is perfect. Conan's words land like hammer blows, while the wizard frames the journey like a survivor telling a firelit tale. Casting the warrior was its own odyssey. Hollywood's hard-eyed icons were considered, men whose reputations already filled the frame. But a bodybuilding documentary revealed someone who didn't merely suggest Conan, he embodied him. The size, the poise, the unshakable confidence felt inevitable, as if the role had waited for this body, this stride. What could have played as novelty became destiny. The camera believed he could swing a massive blade and mean it. Becoming Conan required more than muscle. It demanded transformation. 18 months of relentless training reshaped the star into a creature of iron and instinct. Not just weights, but horses, swords, and the harsh ballet of staged combat. He trained with a martial arts master to fuse brutality with grace, so each strike read cleanly and every parry carried weight. He learned to ride like someone born to the step, to track edges and points as extensions of intent. He grew out his hair, took acting coaching, and studied movement until he stalked like a predator. When cameras rolled, he wasn't imitating a barbarian. He inhabited one. The world had to be equally convincing, less a set than a culture. John Milius folded in influences from everywhere: samurai codes and Japanese ghost stories, especially echoes of Kwaidan in the film's ritual-soaked spaces. The painterly fury of Frank Frazetta shaped the compositions, bodies carved from shadow and fire, steel catching the sun like a signal. The script draws from Robert E. Howard's Pulps, with bones from later work by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. Production designer Ron Cobb fused Egyptian, Celtic, Nordic, and Mesoamerican motifs into environments both specific and timeless. Temples rise like memories. Torture wheels become monuments. The myth speaks quietly to history. Conan's most quoted line echoes a sentiment attributed to Genghis Khan, and Mongol resonances ripple across the story. There's a desert dog chase that winks at the conqueror's reputed fear of them. The film's obsession with steel hums with iron lore, and the name Subotai brushes against a famed general. These touches root the fantasy in older logic: conquest, will, and the price of domination. Getting to the finished film was a gauntlet of almost-were choices. Oliver Stone's first draft roared with apocalyptic ambition: mutant hordes, titanic beasts, and a post-collapse world where sorcery snarled with scavenged machinery. It was bold, massive, and basically unfilmable in the early 80s. Directors were courted, including a visionary fresh off a spaceship nightmare, but he passed. Producer Dino De Laurentiis made the decision that set the film's soul: hand it to John Milius, whose sensibility, iron discipline, elemental myth, and a taste for danger fit Conan perfectly. Milius pared the story back to mud, smoke, iron, and bone, and made death feel heavy again. That heaviness followed into the edit. The first cut came in hot and brutal, too much even for the iron stomach shepherding it. The death of Conan's mother was longer and more explicit before it was reshaped into the version that still stuns. Other beats were trimmed, a few lost, and some resurrected in home releases. What survived is savage already, which makes the imagination lurch at what the earlier sequences must have felt like. The production's appetite for realism came at a price. Animal rights advocates and environmental groups watched with alarm. Reports surfaced of a dog kicked, horses brought down hard, and a notorious moment where a camel takes a punch that remains in the film. Meanwhile, elaborate sets rose in Spain's salt marshes, altering fragile landscapes and sparking environmental outrage. The movie wasn't just a spectacle, it was a provocation. On screen, danger often wasn't illusion. The wasteland chase with the dogs wasn't smoothed by trickery. Those animals were fast, aggressive, unpredictable. There were takes when the lead ran as much for survival as for the camera. Raw footage reveals flickers of real alarm as the dogs leap higher than expected, claws flashing. Choreographing each run became a gambler's exercise, timing the sprint, trusting distances, hoping the animals obeyed. Sometimes they didn't. The scene crackles with authentic peril because that's what it was. The villain's cult refuses to float away as pure fantasy. Its rituals and rhetoric borrow from long human obsessions. Medieval flagellants haunt the frame. True believers convinced public suffering might call down mercy. The shadow of 1970s messianic figures, not least Manson and Jonestown, drifts across the crowds, reminding us how devotion curdles into surrender when the promise is absolute. Fuse suffering, belonging, and the serpent's smile, and people will lay down their names. The role reshaped its star beyond cinema. The training, the discipline, the single-minded march toward a goal rekindled a competitive fire. After stepping away from the stage, he felt the pull again, re-entering a stormy contest and tying a historic crown. Conan forged a movie star and briefly reforged a champion. Even the blood had a backstory. Cold weather turned fake gore into slush that refused to flow. The solution was simple and spirited. Spike the concentrate with vodka so it wouldn't freeze. It looked right, moved right, and sometimes ended up swallowed during a messy take. More than one performer did an involuntary shot, then asked for another with a rueful grin. Not all of Stone's early visions vanished. One echo lingers around the film's most iconic artifact. In an early conception, the crypt where the hero claims his blade was a remnant of Atlantis, a drowned civilization gifting weapon and destiny. The final cut doesn't say it aloud, but the atmosphere remains. There's a chill in that chamber, a sense that the sword isn't just steel, but inheritance. Sometimes myth leaves the set with the people who made it. One of the swords didn't vanish into a warehouse. It took up residence above a governor's desk years later, a personal relic with a message: discipline, transformation, relentless pursuit. Realism had another edge. There were almost no stunt doubles for the leads. The bodies were too distinctive to fake. That meant riding hard, swinging heavy, and taking hits without a mask. Sandahl Bergman's dance-forged agility gave Valeria grace and danger. Her co-star brought raw power. The price was bruises and, in one harrowing moment, blood. During a close-quarters clash, a blade took the tip of Bergman's finger. She pressed on, professional to the bone. The fights feel real because they cost something. Practicalities often turned darkly comic. On battle days, some stunt performers took their time dying, rolling, writhing, and devouring frames with operatic agony. It delighted the camera and wrecked the schedule. The fix was brisk, extra cash for those who hit the ground and stayed there. The choreography tightened and the carnage moved with the rhythm the director demanded. That brings us back to the voice that holds the tale together. The initial plan tied face and fate in one conquering presence, the star guiding us with his own narration. Concerns about accent and clarity nudged the production toward Mako, whose storyteller's soul turned connective tissue into spellcraft. Conan's sparse lines land like iron, while the wizard's voice drifts like smoke from a sacrificial fire. All paths lead to a moment of irreversible cinema, a torch arcing through darkness toward a palace window. The throw isn't perfect, the aim imprecise. It doesn't matter. The flame finds breath, and the set, built with care and destined for this trial, catches. There's no second take. The inferno swallows a handcrafted world in one roaring, unrepeatable shot. Accident becomes art. Destruction becomes creation. In the end, Conan the Barbarian wasn't shot so much as forged. It speaks in silence and thunder, in steel and scar, in laughter that fogs winter air, and blood that refuses to freeze. It borrows from history, raids the treasures of art, risks skin with animals, blades and walls of flame, and trusts you to feel the weight of everything that went into it. That trust was rewarded. The movie endures because it is hand-hewn, worn, dangerous, beautiful. Its world isn't a place you visit with your eyes alone. You feel it in your bones. And when the music swells and the drums return, you understand why this legend still walks. Because it was made the hard way, on the edge of a sword, under a sky that has watched empires rise and burn and sink into myth. Steel, fire, blood, legends.